I never imagined that my life would take this course. When I married David, I knew I was entering a new phase, but I didn't expect the biggest challenge not to marriage itself, but something much more complicated. David had a son, Michael, a 21-year-old, beautiful, charming, self-assured boy. At first, our coexistence was quiet, respectful, almost cold. But things started to change, and I couldn't say exactly when. Small moments, time-consuming, subtle smiles. It was as if something was being built between us without any of them saying a word. And then, out of nowhere, I realized Michael didn't look at me as a stepson would look at his stepmother at that moment. A shiver traveled my body. It was a forbidden, unacceptable thought. But the truth, the idea that he wanted me, made my body react in a way I couldn't control. I tried to ignore, pretend it was my head. But when Michael first touched me in a different way, I knew that was not just imagination, and believe me, story was just beginning. David traveled a lot for work, which left me alone at home for days. The only company, Michael. In the beginning, our relationship was quiet. We talked, watched TV together. He even helped me in the kitchen from time to time. It was a normal coexistence. Until it ceases to be, things started to change subtly. The time-consuming looks, the accidental touches, the jokes that looked innocent but had a different tone. I pretended that I didn't realize it, but my body reacted. One night as we had dinner, Michael looked at me in a way that made me swallow dry. Her eyes walked down my face, then went down a little more, without haste. I felt exposed, but at the same time, excited. "You look very beautiful when it is distracted," he suddenly said with a half smile. I felt my heart shoot, swallowed. He shouldn't talk like that. Shouldn't like it. After that, everything seemed loaded. The tension in the air, the subtle eyes, the proximity. I tried to ignore it, but I knew something was about to happen. A week later, Michael came home late. I was in the kitchen wearing just a long t-shirt. He passed me, his eyes slowly sliding down my body. A dense silence filled the environment, and worse, I wanted to see how far it would go. That morning, I was alone at home. David had traveled the day before, and Michael had not yet left the room. I took the silence to take a long, relaxing shower, until it was interrupted by a knock on the bathroom door. My body froze. No one ever beat there, especially him. "Can I come in quickly? I forgot something here." Michael's voice on the other side of the door made me hesitate. It was a strange situation. Never before he had asked for something like this. But after a second, I unlocked and let it go. He came in calmly, the slow steps. The smell of his perfume took over the hot space of the bathroom, and something in the way he looked at me made my body awaken. I turned my back, pretending to ignore. I felt his eyes on my naked back despite the towel covering my body. Time seemed to drag itself. Every second there in that tight space increased tension. My heart accelerated without my control. When he finally left, I let a long, deep breath. It was the first time I felt that something was really out of place. Worse, I couldn't stop thinking about that all day. After that moment in the bathroom, everything seemed different. Each meeting with Michael had a new weight, electricity in the air that did not exist before. One afternoon, I was on the couch reading a book when I felt his gaze on me. I pretended I didn't realize, but the heat went up my body. Michael was leaning against the wall, watching me. "You are different." I looked up at him, surprised by the sentence. My stomach rolled. Was it my impression, or was he getting closer than usual? I swallowed hard and tried to disguise, but when he sat beside me on the couch, close enough for me to feel the warmth of his body, I knew it wasn't my head. The silence weighed. The tension between us was palpable. He ran a hand over his hair, looked away for a second, but soon he stared at me again. I knew what he was thinking. Proximity made me breathe faster. My whole body was alert. My fingers lightly tightened the sofa fabric as if I needed to hold on so as not to do something impulsive. The truth was, Michael was no longer just my husband's son. I was starting to accept it. I tried to pretend nothing was happening, but it was impossible. It's the way Michael looked at me, as if he was studying me, as if he was expecting a signal. Everything made me feel a strange heat on my skin. That night, I was already in the room when I heard a light knock on the door. I opened, and there he was. Your gaze loaded with something I didn't want to name. "I need to talk to you." My throat dried up. He looked nervous, restless. My heart fired. When he entered and closed the door behind him, I don't know what's going on with me, ... But I feel something between us. You feel too, don't you? My body crashed. The air was dense. The silence that followed was our answer. His proximity left me without reaction. My whole body screamed to back down, but my legs didn't move. I knew that was wrong, but the truth? My body didn't care about right or wrong at that moment. Michael looked at me like he was waiting for something I didn't know if I could give, but deep down, I wanted to. And maybe he knew that the room was quiet, but the air between us was loaded. I couldn't answer or move. My whole body was on alert, every cell aroused by Michael's presence there, so close to me. He took a step further, hesitant. My breath failed. I felt when his fingers brushed lightly on my arm. It was a subtle, almost accidental touch, but it sent an electric shock straight to my skin. My heart hit hard, a deaf drum against her chest. I should have retreated, but I was there, paralyzed, as if stuck in the tension of that moment. The silence was deafening. My mind shouted that it was wrong, but my body reacted otherwise. Every inch of my skin was aware of his proximity. Michael took a deep breath, the voice coming out hoarse. If this is just my head, ... Tell me now. I opened my mouth to answer, but no word came out. My mind said one thing, but my body said another. The heat went up my face, my skin tingled, and my hands trembled slightly. I could feel the desire throbbing in the air, because the truth was that I didn't want it to stop. And at that moment, without saying anything, Michael knew the answer. The space between us seemed to decrease every second. Michael was close, very close. My heart beat hard. My breathing was irregular. I felt the warmth of his body radiating, pulling me to something I knew I shouldn't want. He said nothing, but it didn't go back either. When I realized, his hand was already at my waist. Touch was firm, hot, and made me shudder. I should push him away, but my hands betrayed my own control, staying there. Real estate, my lips have gone through it, but I said nothing. That pause was our last moment to retreat. Only none of us wanted. Michael leaned slowly. It was slow. Was intense. I could feel his breath mixed with mine. Time seemed to slow down. And then it happened. His lips found mine. It was like lighting a spark on a dry field. The shock took over my body. A shiver went up my spine. My hands, before tense, slid into his shoulders, and before I realized, it already returned the kiss. My mind shouted that it was wrong, but I couldn't think anymore. Why the truth? I had already lost this battle. All I wanted was more. The moment our lips separated, reality hit me like a cold shock. My heart still hammered my chest. My breath was heavy. But my mind shouted, what had I just done? I got up quickly, moving away from him, feeling the skin still tingling through the recent touch. Michael remained there, watching me, the expression loaded with something between desire and uncertainty. The silence was deafening. My hands trembled. I needed to convince myself that it meant nothing. But how? If everything in me asked for more? I spent the rest of the day trying to distract myself. I cleaned the house, organized things that didn't need to be organized, turned on the TV without paying attention to anything. But my mind always returned to the same point. The memory of the touch, the kiss, the way Michael looked at me, of the heat of his skin next to mine. When the night fell, I lay on the bed, but sleep didn't come. I turned around, restless, feeling the fasting pulse just to remember that moment. Then I heard steps outside my room. My heart fired. I knew who it was, and I knew that if he came in, nothing else could be ignored. The sound of the steps approaching my room made my heart fire. My breathing was stuck in the throat. I knew it was him. The doorman turned slowly, as if he expected me to stop him. But I didn't stop it. Michael entered, closing the door behind him. The lamplight illuminated only part of his face, and his eyes met me in the dark. I had never seen him look like this to me. He said nothing, just stayed there watching me as if she were seeking silent permission. I sat on the bed not knowing what to do. My body was on alert, my mind a mess. I tried to ignore. He started, the low, tense voice. But I can't. You know what I'm talking about? My chest climbed and descended with rapid breathing. I knew exactly what he was talking about. The distance between us was small, too small. The silence weighed. every second dragging on torturantly. My mind shouted that I should stop him. But then, I felt the mattress sink slightly when he took another step ahead. His smell was everywhere. The warmth of your body invaded my space, and as much as my mind shouted that I should say something, my body remained motionless. I knew that from that moment there would be no return. The space between us seemed non-existent. I felt the warmth of his body, every inch of my skin on alert. I should stop that, but I wanted. Michael licked his lips, his eyes fixed on mine. His chest climbed and slowly descended as if trying to control herself. "We can no longer pretend," he whispered, his voice loaded with something intense. I swallowed hard. He was right. Pretending that nothing was happening was no longer an option. My mind shouted all the reasons why it was wrong, but my body just felt. My heart beat so loud that I could hear. I just needed to step back, break that moment before it was late. But instead, my hand rose slowly and landed over his chest. I felt his breathing fail. And at that moment, I understood that there was no return. I had just made my decision, and Michael knew that my hands were still on his chest. Michael's heart was hitting hard, as fast as mine. I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to deal with that. I just knew I couldn't walk away. Michael raised his hand and touched my face lightly. Its touch was soft, but loaded with something intense, almost dangerous. If this is a mistake, then I don't want to be right. My legs lost strength, and all within me was divided between reason and desire. I knew that crossing this line would mean something irreversible. But what if I had already crossed? Michael slid his fingers down my arm, and I shivered. The heat climbed through my skin, and my breathing got stuck. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to find a remnant of control. But when I opened them, he was still there, waiting. The room was silent, the air among us dense. My mouth opened to say something, but no word came out, because deep down I already knew the answer. I took a deep breath, and then, without thinking, my fingers slowly slid down his neck. The decision was already made. Nothing else could be denied. That moment changed everything. There was no return. I knew we were stepping on forbidden territory, that there was consequences for all that. For some reason, the moment my fingers slid down Michael's neck, nothing else seemed to import. His breath failed. I felt his body tense under my touch, as if waiting for me to walk away. But I didn't get away. Michael pulled me closer, and at that moment the world around us disappeared. There was no guilt. There was no fear. There was only that raw and inevitable connection. Time seemed suspended. His breathing mixed with mine, the warmth of our bodies so close that I could feel every minimum movement. And then, after that night, everything would be different. There would be no way to pretend nothing happened. What would come next? The guilt? The regret? Or something stronger than any of us could control? The answer seemed distant, but at the same time, inevitable. I still didn't know what the next step would be. But one thing was certain. Can desire lead us to unexpected places? But how far is it going to go?